coming in here just momentarily, but glad you're here. And just to let you know, following his presentation this evening, you will have opportunities if you would like to sign up for Diabetes Undone. Jan will be able to assist you. You can either do that through the website, or if you choose to write a check to sign up for Diabetes Undone, she can take care of your whole needs and just get you registered for that. If you need any additional information about that, about Diabetes Undone, we have folders. If any of you, these little flyers, if any of you need that, let me know and we'll get that into your hand. So we're just glad that you're here. I also want to say something else. I mentioned something about this earlier today, and that if any of you are interested, I still have a few more tickets to this 10 Commandment musical for tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock. If any of you are interested, I'll come walking down the aisle and you hold up your hand and tell me how many tickets you want, and I'll get some tickets into your hand. It's 5 o'clock tomorrow evening in Glendale. Really excited about this. I told you this is put together. Those of you, by the way, that saw that video production of my story earlier, that is going to be part of this. I don't think it's going to be shown tomorrow night, but it's part of this whole Ten Commandment musical production that they are doing. And it's they're promoting healthy living practices, and so they videotape mine for part of that sequence and series that they have that's going to be ongoing. But anyway, I'm excited about this musical production, top quality musicians. So if any of you are interested, I will place that into your hands momentarily. And okay, I thought Dr. Youngberg was coming. Seriously, folks, I'm not prepared to give the presentation tonight. Okay. Yeah. Have you enjoyed this time? Enjoyed hearing his presentation? Isn't it fascinating? You know, I honestly told him, two of us were talking earlier, and, you know, here I am, I'm 61 years, almost 62 years old, and, you know, I had wished I had known this kind of stuff 40 years ago. You know, if I'd have known this when Jan and I first got married, what a difference it could have made in our lives. And yet, having said that, I'm going to tell you something that is really kind of strange. It really kind of may sound stupid to you, but I'm going to tell you something. I told this to the doc. I said, in a strange sort of way, I'm glad I used to be fat and I'm not anymore. Do you want to know why? I have a credible story to tell. Don't you think? I'm a living example that the principles that he is espousing truly are possible, huh? And I wouldn't have known that if I'd have been skinny and was here telling you all this kind of stuff. But I have a story to tell, you know. So in a strange sort of way, I'm glad I was fat and I'm not anymore. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I just saw the doc come in, and he's there. He's getting his presentation ready. So, yes, following our presentation, Jan will be in the back for any of you that wish to register for Diabetes Undone. Let me just give you, I'll just take up this time right now as he is preparing to come. When you register, we are also going to give you a lab form that you need to fill out tonight. It's a lab request form. It has Dr. Barton's signature on it, and it's for the hospital, CME Hospital. What will happen is we will be in touch with you with the exact time that you are to come in. You can probably come in. There'll probably be a window of time that you can come in. I need to set that up exactly with the lab, but it will be a week from tomorrow morning, Sunday, the 6th of October, that you can come in to CME Hospital and get your labs drawn. We will have people there to take your blood pressure, your pulse, another questionnaire for you to fill out. We'll also be doing some measurements on you. We'll have you be doing some measurements. These are something that we've not done before, but we're going to take some measurements because when you, as Jan says, she discovered that when she took measurements on herself, that she discovered it was quite remarkable how she had lost and she actually experienced the inches. You know, going from a size 46 waist to a size 32, I really didn't need to do a lot of measuring. I mean, that was kind of a no-brainer. But this is something that will be helpful. So we're kind of trying to take all of that stuff that those of you who decide to take Diabetes Undone will actually see the benefits and the change that it's making in your life. So a week from Sunday morning is that first blood draw. But as you fill that information out tonight, I will take it into the lab on Monday to the director of the clinical lab at Adventist Health Simi Valley, and they will make up the labels and everything. So when you come into that place to have your blood drawn, they will have your tubes ready, the little vials for you to your blood to be drawn and be ready to go for everything. So, yeah. Do any of you, by the way, as I'm just waiting for the doc to come up, do any of you have any questions about that? That maybe you have more questions about the Diabetes Undone that we are going to be doing locally? Anything that we can answer about that? Yes. Not that I know of. They just did one earlier this spring, and I don't know when their next scheduled one is. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably we'll be doing one again in 2020, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that for sure. So, yes. And for those of you that don't know, our presentation will be, our Diabetes Undone will be typically on Monday nights. However, there are 2 nights that we have to do it on Thursday night. There is 1 week where we have to do one on Monday night and another one on Thursday night because of Dr. Westerdahl's schedule. He is going to be, you heard him say earlier, and also Dr. Youngberg, that they go to this, what is it, lifestyle? American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and that is a week in the end of October that he has to be out of town for that. So we had to do a little modification, and Jan and I will actually, she has a meeting that she must attend in Maryland that same week that Dr. Westerdahl is going to be gone. So we had to just kind of juggle the schedule a little bit, but we have that full schedule available for you. Yes. Yes, we'll keep you posted. If you give us all of that information, we'll keep you posted. We'll send you a little information about all that kind of stuff and keep you well informed. Okay? I think that we are ready for Dr. West to do his presentation. So we're going to let you take it away, and I'm going to begin with a word of prayer. Okay? Lord, we are so grateful that you have made us, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that you really have given us the ability through holistic means, to receive healing and wholeness to our body. And thank you for the information that Dr. Youngberg can share with us and how this can help us. And so we just pray that as we listen tonight, as we put the pieces together, that it will help us to experience a better quality of life. Thank you for being with us here this evening. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Pastor Phil and Pastor Jan, for hosting me and my wife, Betsy, this weekend. It's been a quick weekend here, a marathon kind of, right? So we're on mile 18. We're starting to see the end of the tunnel here. And so tonight is kind of the wrap-up, right? As promised, we're looking at undoing, by understanding how to undo diabetes, we're literally undoing the primary causes of cardiovascular disease, of dementia, and of cancer in particular. So we're going to be touching on some of the studies that show how this comes together. But I just want to again thank Dr. John Westerdahl for his willingness to actually be the main facilitator for the Diabetes Undone program starting next Monday, correct? Not this coming Monday, but the following Monday after the initial labs that are done on Sunday. This is a unique opportunity and Pastor Phil was just telling me this afternoon, is that ever since we started doing this series, this weekend kickoff, all of a sudden people started becoming aware of what this really was and what this could really do. And so the program is actually filling up really nicely. And he told me, I was really pleased. He says, you know what, we're not going to limit. Yeah, because that's initially we were going to limit it to 30 people. They're not going to limit it to 30 people. So don't feel like, no stampede after the program tonight to sign up. There's not going to be a max, and so he's willing to sign up extra people because it really is a unique opportunity for you to take advantage of something that I'm actually involved in some national programs that do this type of work, and it costs thousands of dollars, and that's online. Okay, you're doing this with people that are live, that can help you and feed you and help you through this whole process. So I'm actually shocked myself at how little something like this costs. And you know why? You know why it costs so little? It's because everybody's volunteering their time. That's why. Okay, otherwise it would be thousands of dollars, trust me. Okay, so again, thank you, Dr. Westerdahl, for your willingness to facilitate this program for the next 8 weeks. And it reminds me of the first time that we met. I think coming back from Guam the first time, 1994, or sometime in 1994. Well, actually, it was even before that. It was 1988, I believe. Were you still there? Were you at Castle Memorial Hospital in '88, or was it? Okay, so it was. I had just finished my last internship at the hospital in Singapore in 1988, and we stopped in Hawaii for a week to just be with friends, and it was actually our honeymoon. Betsy and I, we were having our extended honeymoon. We kind of rushed the wedding so that we could be married before I went to Singapore, and then after Singapore, my internship in Singapore, we took a month to travel Asia, all the way from Singapore to Borneo, all the way up to Japan, through all the countries, and then a week in Hawaii. And that was the first time that we met, and I remember being so impressed with your radio show that you did and all the work that you did at Castle Memorial Medical Center, running the wellness programs and lifestyle medicine programs there. So you're in good hands with Dr. Westerdahl. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often. So I'm really pleased that he actually is one of the most knowledgeable doctors in the area of nutrition, no question, and lifestyle medicine in general. So I wish it was less than 3 hours away from me. I'd come in and sit in as well. So let's just jump right into this. As I told you earlier, when I first became enmeshed into clinical realities of dealing with diabetes, it became very evident to me that to call myself a lifestyle medicine doctor, I needed to be an expert at understanding all the underlying drivers and causes of diabetes and how to help people reverse, not manage, but reverse diabetes. Because when you're managing something, you're actually accepting it as something that you're going to have for the rest of your life, and you're just managing risk factors, which typically in this case just means managing blood sugars. And as I pointed out earlier, major studies have documented that if all we do is manage blood sugars, we're way off the appropriate journey. We're not doing the right thing. So you can artificially, is a good word here, you can artificially lower your blood sugars, but that doesn't mean that you're actually healthier. Okay, and so that's maybe a whole new way of looking at this. Say it's how you lower your blood sugars is everything. Okay, so I remember running into not a patient of mine, but there was somebody that was waiting to see one of my colleagues who was an internal medicine physician at our wellness center, and this was in Guam, and he was waiting to see the internist, a good friend of mine, and somebody said to him, a friend of his said to him while I was present there in the office lobby, he said, hey, you should actually join this lifestyle medicine program. Then you could reverse your diabetes. And he looked at me. He says, why? He says, well, that's what medicines are for. Why would I want to change my diet when we got medicines? I mean, we're in the 21st century here. Let's just take some medicine. Well, again, the Mayo Clinic has made it really clear that if we buy in to that perspective, which unfortunately is standard perspective, that as long as we're kind of controlling our hemoglobin A1C and our fasting blood sugars with medication, that we're okay, we're actually increasing our risk of premature death in a dramatic way, and then increasing our risk for everything else in a dramatic way. And that's the key point that we want to address tonight, is how can we use these principles, even if we don't have diabetes, even if we don't have pre-diabetes, and reverse whatever personal risk that we have. So let's just jump right into this. So as I suggested earlier, treating diabetes and reversing diabetes is really the tip of the iceberg, something that I spent decades working on. But as I've understood, especially in the last 5 years, the key issue is addressing the burden of disease, the burden of health risk that constitutes the part of the iceberg that you can't see, because it rests under the surface of the water. And as you may know, the part of the iceberg that's underneath, that's unknown to us, is about 80 to 90% of the problem. 80 to 90% of the mass of the iceberg lies underneath the surface of the water. That is what is represented by what we refer to as insulin resistance. Now, so what is the cause of high blood sugar? Primarily, it's insulin resistance. Now, most of us, I would say most of Americans actually have high blood sugars, but not at the time that we check our blood sugars. So the average American that is not diagnosed with any real problems, when do they have their blood sugars checked? Okay, those of us who go to the doctor on a yearly basis, very important to have our physical, very important. Well, that physical will typically include what we call a comprehensive metabolic profile. That metabolic profile is very good. It has over a dozen independent tests on it that tell you how your kidneys are doing, how your liver's doing, your electrolytes, is your calcium and potassium adequate, is it too low, too high, your sodium chloride, a whole bunch of tests, including kidney function, like I said, and it looks at a fasting glucose. Should be fasting. So if you go into the lab some morning before breakfast, preferably before 9 o'clock, then we have a fasting blood sugar to work off of. That is, at least historically, has been the only blood sugar that people ever get. And that is why so few of the individuals who have pre-diabetes never know it until they've already developed complications. Literally 90% of individuals who have pre-diabetes don't know it. In other words, it's almost, I say, at least in medicine, that assume somebody's pre-diabetic until proven otherwise. Literally. And that actually includes even young people. Frequently, in my clinic, I've seen 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds with advanced prediabetes. It's common. It's a common problem, but since we typically only check the fasting blood sugar, we don't know. So, essentially, think about insulin resistance in this way. The insulin is like the key that hooks up to an insulin receptor on the surface of the cell membrane of muscle cells, of liver cells in particular. And insulin is a key that basically connects, and then if the connection is appropriate, if there's no resistance there, it'll literally be able to unlock that doorway so that the receptor clicks, the door opens, and sugar flows from the blood where it's building up, where we measure it, into the cell, where the cell can utilize it for energy. So why would a cell, a muscle cell, become resistant to insulin? This is a real question now. Okay, so one answer here is covered in saturated fat. That's actually a good answer. But actually, that's not the main answer I'm looking for. It's a good answer, though. Why would a muscle cell become resistant to insulin? So let's kind of reverse engineer this. Okay, what is insulin doing? Insulin is trying to unlock that passageway, that tunnel, that doorway for sugar to move from the blood into the cell. And so why would a muscle cell say, I don't want any more sugar? Yeah, because it's full. It's got all the sugar that it wants and more inside the muscle, and so it's putting a moratorium out there saying, we're now officially resistant to insulin. We don't want insulin to work real good because we got all the sugar we want. In fact, we got more than we want. So they're blocking that. All right, so if that's the case, then what would be one of there's several answers or strategies to address that. But in terms of that aspect of insulin resistant, what would be an obvious solution to begin to implement? How do you get a muscle to want more sugar? Exercise. Oh yeah. So that's why exercise is so wonderful, and that's why I actually gave a handout to Pastor Phil just this morning that walk somebody through. All of you that are getting a blood test Sunday morning, not this Sunday morning, but the following Sunday morning, will get a handout that says, here, these are some strategies we recommend. We recommend that you start checking your blood sugar before every meal and 1 or 2 hours after the beginning of that meal. Now, this is for those of you who are found to have a borderline or high hemoglobin A1C, or any of those of you that already know or suspect even that you have potential problems with prediabetes, which, remember, at least 1 out of 2 of us between 40 and 59 have a minimum of prediabetes. If you're over than 59, you have a 2 out of 3 chance of having prediabetes. That's 67% of us are pre-diabetic automatically if we're in the age group of 60 to 74. And if you're over 74, your risk of being pre-diabetic is 3 out of 4, 75%. So in other words, if you're not pre-diabetic, you're in a minority group automatically. Okay, in a healthier minority group. So one of the simplest strategies, and I'm not saying it's the most important strategies, I would say that what we eat ultimately is really more important, but who's choosing here? Who says, remember last night, for those of you who were here, the 3 pillars of optimal health and healing potential are not necessarily ultimately the most important things, ultimately, but they are the 3 most important things that set the stage for the most important things so that we can be successful, okay, and with family dynamics and how we deal with people socially and our willingness to forgive and our attitude and how we feel, and all those things don't just happen. It's not just a personality. It's based on how well we're doing the fundamental strategies. So back to the exercise question. What would be some reasonable strategies to literally reverse that resistance. How are we going to know that? If we're checking our blood sugars before and 1 or 2 hours after most meals. And this is something that anybody, I recommend everybody should just experiment with. Okay, because if you do that, you will see after eating a especially sugary or carbohydrate-rich meal, the refined carbohydrates, which is, just status quo, right? That's what most of us eat. We chow down on highly refined carbohydrate foods, and we think nothing of it because what? That's what everybody else does, and that's what maybe we've done all our lives, and so we just assume this is okay. But how many of us have actually tested to see how that impacts our risk factors? Let me tell you a quick story. When I was working at the Guam Seventh Adventist Clinic, which is a large medical center, over 400 employees on the island of Guam, I was there from all the way from 1994 until 2008. It was a wonderful 14 years of our lives. We raised our kids there on beautiful, island in Guam, and we traveled Asia because we were right there near Bali and Australia. So it was just a totally different experience. Very surreal now looking back 11 years later that we actually had that experience because it's so different from where we are here. But while I was there, I was asked to actually teach a college course at the University of Guam. I'd taught classes at Loma Linda University, at the School of Public Health and the School of Medicine. And so I said, hey, I'm spending most of my time working with patients who've already been diagnosed with major diseases. Wouldn't it be neat to actually work with college students and actually teach a wellness lifestyle medicine class where we weren't just talking theory, but we were actually doing the tests and helping people find out in their early 20s what was going on? Well, so one of the first things that we did, this was a very lab-driven class, where I made sure that they were learning something practical. And I had my nurses come from our clinic and tested everybody's blood sugar level the second week of the class, where they were told, bring in your favorite carbohydrate drink. You choose what that is. If it's a Coke, it can't be a diet drink, right? Because we're doing a carbohydrate stress test, right? And by the way, diet drinks, just so you know, are worse for you than regular sodas. Okay, and I can certainly back that up with scientific literature. I've actually told my children, if we don't buy sodas ever, we don't bring them into the house. But when they were growing up, if we went to a party and everybody was drinking a soda, I said, well, you can have a little bit of regular soda, but if I catch you with a diet soda, there's going to be problems when we get home. Okay, that's how important that is to me. There's a lot of reasons for that. You're actually more likely to gain weight on a calorie-free diet soda over time than drinking regular sodas, even though it has 0 calories. Why? Because it has essentially a chemical in it that's drug-like that actually causes weight gain because of how it affects the metabolism. Just like many people have experienced weight gain from taking a hormone or some other drug that is prescribed to them for another reason, why would that cause weight gain? It's just a little pill that has 0 calories to it because it changes the metabolism. And that's what diet sodas do. So I tell them, bring in your favorite soda, or if you're so advanced in knowledge about health and wellness that you don't drink sodas, bring in whatever carbohydrate drink you think is a healthy drink, and we'll test you based on that. The idea is get 300 to 400 calories of carbohydrates in, and then we test your blood sugar 1 hour later. And so my students were like amazed. So I literally told them, I want everybody, and this was graded. If you don't bring it in, you get docked. Okay, so bring in a drink and bring in whether it's sugar cookies or something that's carbohydrate. And if you're never eating any sugar, then bring in bread. Bring in something that's carbohydrate rich, and we'll check your blood sugars. So I wanted to make this practical because, see, a lot of patients say, well, yeah, I did that glucose tolerance test at the lab, but they gave me this awful syrupy sugar drink. Anybody who's been pregnant and tested for gestational diabetes will know, oh, man, that's really nasty stuff. And so I would never drink that. So I go, well, you know what? Yes, you would, because that's the equivalent of a medium-sized soda at McDonald's. And, you know, and I think that most of us in this room would have to admit that at some point in our life, we've had sodas from some fast food place or used sodas in some way. So we've all done it, and we've all probably enjoyed it as well, myself included. And so it's just equivalent to that. Just because it's super sweet, because it's concentrated, doesn't mean that we haven't done exactly that same thing. So I want to actually have people bring in what they are used to and compare that, because that resonates to their real lifestyle. So to make the long story short, one of my, actually, these are early college students, and we found 1/4 of them had high blood sugars. 25% of them, these are college kids, already had pre-diabetic levels of blood sugars or worse. And one of my students was fairly, plump young man. He's 24 years old. He was working his way through the School of Business, and he had to take this wellness class as one of the cognates that he had to finish to graduate. So he was a senior, and so he did the test. And so I was explaining what all this meant, while we were talking about it. And about an hour into the class, they drew his blood, and he came up to me after the class and showed me the piece of paper. His blood sugar was 335. No clue that he had any health problems whatsoever. Yeah, he was overweight, maybe 50 pounds overweight, but hey, who isn't, right? In Guam, that's just like par for the course, right? And so that was no big deal. All of a sudden, he starts thinking, man, Uncle Joe died after his amputation. Mom went blind because of diabetes. Dad had a heart attack because of his diabetes. And, when you're 24 years old, the last thing on your mind is like, yeah, my parents, they got health problems, but not me. I'm 24 years old. Well, that finger stick that afternoon at the University of Guam changed all that. That denial he didn't think it was denial. He just would have never imagined that he had out of control diabetes. And so I said to him, Tom was his name. I said, Tom, you need to go see your doctor. He said, I don't got a doctor. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to bring a lab for him in 2 days when we meet again, and I'm going to have you get this lab done at the closest lab to your house. So we did a glucose tolerance test on him. He had, as I strongly suspected, based on defined protocols, out of control diabetes. Now, what do you think happened to him? Do you think he just well, you're going to have this problem for the rest of your life. You better get used to it. You're going to be on medications for the rest of your life. You just got to get used to it. No, he because he was in that wellness program, that was at the very beginning of a 10-week program, a comprehensive lifestyle medicine introduction for each of those students. And so we basically put together in our labs a comprehensive fitness and wellness program. He told me, he said, hey, Doc, this is, I'm under a lot of stress. My parents rely on me I'm going to be the main breadwinner because my parents can't work anymore. They're disabled with their illnesses. And I got a lot of aunts and uncles have the same problem. And so now I find out, man, I'm going to be right there with them in a matter of years, and that can't be. I'm a 2-pack-a-day smoker, and man, when I was in Guam talking to patients, I've never drank alcohol in my life, and I'm really glad I never did, because if I did, I would have really gone overboard, because I kind of have addictive personality. I would booze it up, but I had no idea how much people can drink. When one of my patients, I asked him how much he drank, and he said 2 to 3. I go, 2 to 3 cans? I'm no, 2 to 3 cases. And I didn't even know what a case was. So I said, you mean six-pack? He says, no, cases. There's 3 six-packs in a case. And, I mean, it still boggles my mind, but you don't have to believe me, by the way, but this is actually, there's a lot of people in Guam who actually drink that way. They'll literally hang out at a pickup truck with their buddies, and they'll drink for 4 or 5 hours. And they can actually put down 50 beers. Now, I couldn't drink that much water, you know, but you know, he was just being honest with me. You know, he had some health issues, and so he wanted to be honest with me, and it was surreal to me. I never imagined anybody could drink that much beer. You know, medically speaking, did you know this? That you know what the definition of heavy drinking is? Heavy drinking, medically speaking, any more than 2 drinks in a 24-hour period. So people laugh at that, you know, because like, what? You know, if somebody's drinking, they're going to drink more than 2 beers, right? But or two drink equivalents. But from a medical standpoint, that's heavy drinking. Why? Because heavy drinking is defined by what's clearly bad for us. And we could talk more about moderate drinking. In fact, I had debates at the University of Guam with people. I had no idea how I felt about it, and I'd have them debate whether moderate drinking was better than not drinking at all. And I never influenced, I kid you not, I never influenced this argument ever, every time I taught the class. And every single time they debated this, because the whole point of being able to be a good debater is knowing both sides of the argument. If you know the other side of the argument better than they do, you're going to win the debate. And you know what? Every single time, the group that won the debate was the group that had basically randomly been assigned to argue the point of complete abstinence of alcohol. And one of the college students in the back of the room, she raised her hand after we discussed it, right? And that's when I present my case. She raised her hand and says, you know, I'm a bartender at 3 bars in town. Says, I have never seen a moderate drinker. So she said, this whole argument is mute. She said, there is no such thing as a moderate. Now, of course, I disagree with her, but that was her perspective, being a bartender. It's just that when people drink, you know, you're not necessarily, you know, thinking, well, I'm just a moderate drinker. Anyways, the bottom line is that he was, this 24-year-old was drinking heavily, was smoking heavily. He was completely sedentary. He was stressed out. You know, can we get some colder air? Does everybody get a little bit hot in here? I'm kind of noticing a little hand waving. You know, okay. So if possible, if we could get a little more air in here, that'd be great. So good thing I have this on and not my jacket, right? I'd be sweaty. So he, you know, and so I'm thinking to myself, man, you know, he's a college student. He's not going to want to do this. He's not going to want. And you know what? Because he went through that program and he saw the results of his own blood sugar test 1 hour after that simple soda that he had 1,000 times before, right? Or more than that, really. That really affected him. That engaged him so powerfully in the program. You know, by the end of the 10-week wellness, it's just a class at the university, he had effectively stopped smoking, stopped drinking. He had lost 50 pounds in that period of time, and he had completely reversed his diabetes. So some people say, well, yeah, because he's 24 years old, he can pull that off. I've seen 90-year-olds do it. Literally. In fact, right now I have a patient who's 96 years old. He's another multimillionaire, which unlike the other multimillionaire I mentioned last night, basically decided he was going to do whatever was necessary, and he was going to not deviate to the left or the right, and he did it. It's an interesting story. he was so interested in diabetes, not because he was concerned about himself, but because he had a family member that had out-of-control diabetes. He was 89 years old at the time. He actually was chairman of the board of the publishing house that eventually published my book, Goodbye Diabetes, which was the precursor to the Diabetes Undone program as a comprehensive program like what we're talking about here. And so he was literally harassing my publisher to harass me to write this book. And it took us 5 years. It took us 5 years. And so Tom was his name. Tom was, at 89 years old, he was the first one to get a copy of this book. And he read it, and he was convicted. He called me up. He says, Wes, rough, old voice. He said, Wes, you got to do all these tests on me. I go, absolutely, Tom. Yeah, you're the chairman of the board, right? Literally. And so he came to my office. We did all those tests, lived in Laguna Beach. And then before I went over the test with him, he goes like, now, Wes, he says, I don't want you to sugarcoat this for me. Okay, I want you to tell me, just like a good chairman of the board. He doesn't want yes people. Oh, yeah, I like your idea. Oh, yeah, go for it. No, he says, if everybody agrees with me on this board, I'm going to fire all of you and find some people that have some advice for me, right? So just tell me like it is. And I said, Tom, I'm telling you, you have out-of-control diabetes. Your blood sugars at 1 and 2 hours were over 300 on that glucose tolerance test. He was sitting down already. We had a kind of a boardroom where I meet with groups and my patients. And so he was there with his wife, and he was like, said, now come on, Wes, tell me. I'm telling you, Tom, you had out-of-control diabetes. And then he slammed his fist, this open fist, on the table and says, what are we going to do about this? And I smiled, and I said, Tom, I'm glad you asked. Okay, because I'm going to tell you everything that you can do. And I love working with a successful businessman. Anybody who's been dramatically successful in any aspect of their life, any aspect, but especially business, they know what it takes to get the job done. You don't become a multimillionaire from nothing. There's literally nothing. He grew up in a very poor home because you want a lot of money, because you wish you could do the right things. You become successful because you do what needs to be done and you keep working until it gets done. It's an attitude. And so I love working with people who already have that attitude, and they're just saying, just tell me, just educate me, I'm going to do it. So one of the first things that I told Tom is that, he didn't really have a bad diet. You don't have to have a bad diet to join the Diabetes Undone program, okay? All you need is a desire to optimize your diet. He had an okay diet. He ate better than 90% of Americans, and he could have easily argued with me and go like, Wes, I'm already doing so much better than everybody else. Talk about something else. But he didn't do that. Why? Because he wanted to be successful, and he knew that he needed to be in a position of listening to the experts. So I showed him how to optimize a plant-based diet. I showed him how, in his case, one of his nemesis, one of his big challenges was that he loved woodworking, which is a great thing. See, he would bring me all these kind of cool bowls from Hawaii, from the special wood from Hawaii. He had tons of money, so he'd buy this really expensive wood and do woodworking, right? And so he'd bring them to me. He'd say, hey, here's a present for you and your wife. So I got tons of bowls in my house from Tom. But then he'd do that, and he would not eat on a schedule. He'd just, what's more natural than just eating when you're hungry? On the surface, it sounds like a real reasonable thing. Just eat when you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not. The problem is the body doesn't work that way. The body operates on circadian rhythms. Why don't you just sleep when you're sleepy? Instead of going to bed at a normal time and at a good time and getting up at a good time, just sleep when you're sleepy. Have you ever heard the idea of follow your heart? Just follow your feelings. You know, like that Sprite commercial, right? Just, follow your thirst. It sounds so natural, and it is natural, by the way, but is that healthy? It is the antithesis of healthy. If we follow our feelings, if we follow our heart, we're going to be in a lot of trouble really quick. You know, if the average person just did what they felt like, you know what would happen? They wouldn't be in a relationship very long, that's for sure. Okay? They wouldn't have friends for very long. There would be all kinds of problems, and we would die very young if we did not learn how to effectively set limits. So one of the biggest goals for us is to become experts at setting limits joyfully, like I said last night. If we're good at setting limits, that means that we have allowed for what's best and how we can optimize our health. So bottom line is that Tom did all this, and one of the main reasons I'm telling you his story is because he learned about walking after meals. And so this is something that I challenge all of you to do, is check your blood sugars an hour or two, preferably 1 hour after the beginning of a meal. This is for anybody, regardless of what your condition is. Just see what happens. Check before and after of a regular meal. In fact, splurge a little bit. Just eat stuff that you might not think is the best for you, but something that you normally would eat. And then find out how high your sugar goes at 1 hour, and then add a 10 to 20 minute light walk after the meal before you check your blood sugar at 1 hour. And look at the difference. The higher our blood sugars are after a meal, because our predisposition towards prediabetes or diabetes, the more benefit we're actually going to get by doing light to moderate exercise, like a light walk, immediately after the meal. You can lower your blood sugars anywhere from 1 point to 3 points for every minute that you walk lightly after a meal. So for Tom, who is running over 300 points on blood sugar after a meal, for him to go out for a walk after breakfast would potentially lower his blood sugars almost 100 points, and that's just because of the exercise, and that's light exercise. And then, once he learned the impact of that, we optimized the diet and balance it, and no more snacks, because that's what he was doing. He'd work until about 8 o'clock, and he'd go like, man, I forgot to have any dinner. So let's just make myself a nice big sandwich, a nice, quote, healthy sandwich. And so he was eating too late. He was eating at the wrong times. He was eating whenever, rather than at distinct times that the body can be prepped for and be prepared for to be able to handle better. So essentially, Tom says, you mean if I exercise after breakfast and maybe after lunch, that my blood sugars will really improve? I said, absolutely, they will. And his wife glared at me. She says, have you seen Tom walking down the hallway? He could hardly walk a straight line because he's got neurologic issues, and he's 89 years old. He's kind of weak. And so I said, well, Vi, the good news is that if you walk with him, he'll probably be safer. She kind of glared at me. But you know what? They did it, and they became the talk of Laguna Beach. In that gated community above the bay, they would go walking for 45 minutes every morning right after breakfast. They didn't walk very fast, okay, but 89 years old. And and then they changed their diet comprehensively. Within 5 weeks, he called me up before his 90th birthday. This was 5 weeks later. He said, Wes, I want to get tested again. I said, it's only been 5 weeks, Tom. He said, I don't care, but I want to know before my 90th birthday. I said, okay. So we tested him. Diabetes was gone. He had an A1C of 7.2. It had dropped to a 6.1 in 5 weeks. Why? Because he'd controlled the after-meal blood sugars with exercise and with the right diet. And those two became the real pillars that helped with his sleep, helped with everything else. Okay. He then went on to 3 months late. 3 months later, we checked him again. Now his A1C was 5.6. He'd reversed pre-diabetes as well. He'd gone from out-of-control diabetic to just pre-diabetic in 5 weeks, and now not even pre-diabetic 3 months later. That was essentially 6 years ago. He's still cranking it. 96 years old. He just had a birthday in July. We did testing. A1C, 5.1. It's been 5.1 for 6 years, for 5.5 years. So, never say that, you know what, I'm just too old for this. If you think you're too old for that, just think about Tom. He did it. It's not a question of age. It's a question of our willingness to take advantage of the information and just apply it and get the results. And so when we exercise right after meals lightly, when we participate in what I call the get sweaty exercises, which are some other time of the day, away from mealtime, at least a couple hours later, where now we're exercising in a way to strengthen the muscles, tone the muscles, and that toning of the muscles dramatically improves insulin sensitivity of the muscle and the liver cells, so they reverse their resistance, they become sensitive, and that insulin now is able to work very well, and now the pancreas doesn't have to produce nearly as much insulin. In fact, the pancreas now can produce as little as 10 or 20% of what it used to have to produce, so now it's not going to wear out. Now it's going to stay healthy. Now it can actually become healing and becoming more effective. And that's the power of introducing these principles. So exercise and insulin resistance is very powerful. How many of you read the book Anatomy of an Illness? Anybody in here? It's an old book. Man, it's a wonderful book written by Norman Cousins where he says, don't deny the diagnosis. If you've been recently diagnosed with diabetes or pre-diabetes or with mild cognitive impairment or with high cholesterol or triglycerides or high blood pressure, or you're struggling with weight, whatever it might be, don't deny the diagnosis. Defy the verdict. Okay? You have the potential to reverse this process. I'm not going to tell this story. Let me jump into... here's some of the complications of poorly controlled diabetes that go beyond blood sugar control. They're basically because you're not doing the things that undo the insulin resistance. Obviously, heart attack, number one, the gangrene, the peripheral ulcers that are caused because we don't have any more sensation in our feet from the peripheral neuropathy, and so we end up injuring our foot, and we don't even know it, and it becomes infected, and a couple weeks later, somebody's talking about amputating our toe or our foot or our leg. Blindness, retinal detachment, kidney dialysis, all these things are 100% preventable, even for people who have been diagnosed with diabetes or pre-diabetes. It just has to do with paying attention to the strategies. Okay, so diabetes is just that tip of the iceberg, which we call a metabolic mess, but it's really just the tip of the metabolic mess. There's many of us, most of us, already are in a pre-diabetic, and if not that, I would say the vast majority of us in this room have levels of insulin resistance, which is the core of the metabolic mess. And by applying the principles, again, that we're emphasizing in this 8-week program with Dr. Westerdahl, Diabetes Undone, it will address high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, depression, anxiety, headaches. One of my good friends and colleagues, Dr. Susanna Bick, who is a neurologist and a professor at University of California at Irvine. And she, back in 1990, she came to Loma Linda University as a neurologist from Europe and wanted to do additional training in lifestyle medicine. And so she became a doctoral student at Loma Linda University. while I was on the full-time faculty there, and then I went into clinical practice, and she said, Wes, can I shadow you? Can I spend some time with you at the Loma Linda Faculty Medical Group in Sun City, which was a retirement community on the way down to San Diego? And so I said, sure. So I was looking forward to learning from her as well. She's a neurologist. She could teach me, and she certainly did, because as she sat and watched me work and see patients, and I'm bragging about how well this patient did in reversing their diabetes or blood pressure or cholesterol issues. And one day, after a couple days of working with me, she says, Wes, have you noticed something about headaches? And I go, yeah, everybody gets better. She goes, no. I'm a neurologist. Headaches don't just get better. Okay, this is a major issue. There was at least 4 patients the day before that had headaches, and they mentioned that to me, and I kind of yeah, good. Oh, your headaches are gone too. Everything's getting better. So I kind of minimized it. I was happy for them, but I didn't fully appreciate the fact that neurologists struggle to help their patients with headaches, and here these patients, it was like a positive side effect of reversing their diabetes or their blood pressure. And so I said to her, well, the main thing going on is that we're reversing the underlying cause of all these things. This insulin resistance that then causes what we call hyperinsulinemia, or an excess production of insulin by the pancreas, and that high insulin is necessary to try to control the blood sugar, even though it rarely does that properly. But that extra insulin is a huge metabolic burden that is the main reason we hold on to weight and we can't lose it. Why? Because insulin stores fat into fat cells. So if we're having a problem with that, I would suggest that we test to see if there's an insulin resistance, high production of insulin, which means you have to measure insulin during a glucose tolerance test. So she was seeing this, and so she, as a neurologist, she said, Wes, would you mind if I use this protocol in my doctoral research thesis? So I said, would I mind? I would love you to do this. This is great. So she worked with her research faculty at the Loma Linda University and put together a study that looked at individuals, tested their insulin levels, people who had intractable headaches all the time, right? And basically, this is what she learned at the end of the study. When people address this very same strategy that will be addressed in the Diabetes Undone program, the very same strategy, the headaches that these patients had, both intensity, duration, and frequency, dropped an average of 75%. Intensity, duration, and frequency. This was such a powerful study that she published this in the interesting medical journal called Medical Hypothesis. Wow, this is a whole new understanding of how headaches come about through addressing this question with hyperinsulinemia. My wife is not here at the moment. I can tell a story on her real quick. She had intractable migraine headaches for years until we figured out that she had this tendency, like I talked about during the afternoon Q&A, blood sugars crashing. When we initiated a protocol to stabilize her blood sugar so they didn't drop, migraines went away and never came back unless she wasn't following the protocol. So now we follow the protocol whether we're traveling or not. Nobody wants to have headaches, right? So basically, there's so many factors that are involved here. Now, I promised earlier that I was going to talk about the relationship between insulin resistance and cancer, and how one of the most profound things that we can do to protect us against the most common cancers, colon cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, skin cancer, those most common cancers, is to reverse insulin resistance. When I first heard about this connection, I was kind of like, I was incredulous. I was like, no, and this has so much power to improve this and that and the other. It can't also be one of the most important things for cancer. So one of my physician colleagues, a family practice physician at Loma Linda, she actually clued me into this. And he says, there's a big relationship between insulin production because of resistance to insulin and breast cancer. I go, really? And so I'm somewhat cynical, as I mentioned before, and so I said, I'm going to find out for myself. So I got on the internet. This is a long time ago. This is when we just had, PubMed, and it was like these 64K computers, right? and I started looking up study after study of the relationship between excess insulin production and breast cancer, and after a couple weeks of doing this, I had 700 studies. This was 25 years ago. This is 25. This is 1994, 93, 94, and I finally said, you know what? I'm wasting my time. I should have accepted this as a fact after 10 studies. I didn't need 700 studies to document that. And when's the last time you have heard that there's a relationship, a major relationship with insulin resistance and therefore the extra production of insulin to try to correct blood sugars and cancer? You don't hear about it, even though it's all over the medical literature. It's everywhere. And just some years ago, the journal of, actually it was called Diabetes Care. It's generally accepted to be the most prominent journal on diabetes management in the world. They published a study showing that current insulin users were 30 to 50% at greater risk of developing cancer. And man, did that create a lot of criticism in the diabetology community. You go like, oh, that's crazy. You're going to cause people to be afraid to take insulin. And so the study is the study. The study is saying if you're using insulin to make up the difference to try to control your blood sugar rather than addressing the cause, and your insulin blood levels, because of your insulin injections, are running higher than they otherwise would normally be for a metabolically healthy person, you're basically taking a growth hormone that promotes cancer in order to control blood sugars. Okay, now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying people should never use insulin. I'm saying that people should do the test to evaluate what the appropriate amount of insulin is and figure out other ways to control the insulin resistance, because if you're compensating for insulin resistance by just taking more insulin, you're dramatically increasing your risk for everything. Does that make sense? Yeah, and again, you don't hear this message very often, but that's the reality of the situation. And so with this study, by the way, was only a 2-year study. In 2 years' time, they noticed a 30 to 50% increased risk in cancer. And so they're saying, no, there's no possible way for colon cancers like that to happen in 2 years. And I'm thinking, you're missing the whole point. Yes, they probably had that earlier, but taking the extra insulin is what's driving the cancer, what's speeding it up, what's promoting it. But it's an initiator and a promoter. So let's take a look at this. So this January 2013, a study. This was not a study with 10 people that was published in, Tijuana. This is a study of 25, almost 26,000 diabetics published in the most respected medical journal on diabetes in the world, where they said current insulin users were 30% more likely to be diagnosed with cancer. Men and women diagnosed, in addition to that, men and women who were diagnosed with diabetes that had diabetes for more than 15 years were 60% and 80% more likely to have cancer versus those who had had diabetes less than 15 years. If there was ever a call to action to undo diabetes, that would be it. You know, one of the most dreaded words in America and worldwide, or the most dreaded letter, is that big C word, right? Cancer. Now, to be honest with you, that's no longer the most dreaded word. It's the A word, Alzheimer's. That's far more dreaded than cancer. Okay? People can come to grips with cancer. Alzheimer's is relentless. Okay? It doesn't take your life. Well, it does that too, but that's not the main point. The main point is that it destroys your life without taking your life right away. Okay? And that is also primarily driven by this same thing, Alzheimer's, right? We talked about that last night in detail. Alzheimer's is primarily the number one cause, metabolic driver of Alzheimer's is insulin resistance of the brain. We can prevent and reverse that. That, to me, is exciting. I mean, the only reason I do this is because I'm so excited about how the possibilities. You know, I would hate to do medicine if all I'm doing is effectively diagnosing somebody and then just saying, I'm sorry, you know, now we know what your problem is, but we have no idea what to do for you. We can give you some medicines that make you feel a little bit better. I would hate to do that. I would rather do anything else than that. Okay, so this is just making you aware that the number one way that we can reverse our risk for cancers is to be on a comprehensive program that reverses insulin resistance. So this is true for so this is true also for metabolic syndrome. Okay, so take a look here. So another big study, almost 39,000 people with cancer, showed a 25 to 61% increased risk of common cancers in those with metabolic syndrome. In other words, you don't have to have diabetes for this to be the problem. Insulin resistance does not occur once you become diabetic. It occurs decades, many decades before somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes. And so that's why we need to jump on it now. In fact, insulin resistance occurs decades even before we are diagnosed with prediabetes. Okay. Now, so as I point out here, high insulin, but not normal levels of insulin reported as risk for cancer initiating and promotion. In other words, a type 1 diabetic who's taking the amount of insulin necessary to correct the fact that they can't produce any, that's life-saving. That's good medicine. But to give a type 2 diabetic who's already producing 4 to 20 times the amount of insulin that they would normally need to control blood sugars and say, well, I know the answer, we'll just give more insulin. That to me is malpractice. That to me is not even understanding the pathology of the disease that you're supposed to be treating. The answer is address the cause. And by addressing the cause, now their insulin levels go way down, dramatically lowering the risk for all these conditions. So as a summary, we've established that the strategies and the lifestyle medicine principles that powerfully undo diabetes and prediabetes, also because they're focusing in on the fundamental aspects of improving the muscle and liver sensitivity to insulin, thus reversing insulin resistance, is also one of the best strategies to preventing and reversing headaches, for preventing and reversing the majority of common cancers, I'm not saying it's the only cause of cancer. Absolutely not. I'm saying it's the fuel that fans the flames of cancer. That's what it is. And by the way, the approach that we take to reverse the excess insulin production also is providing all these other nutrients and the removal of toxins and all the things that the body needs to start healing the process that can promote cancer as well. So you're getting all the benefits of restful sleep, of optimized hydration, of emotional health, of reprogramming the stress response, doing all those things. We've talked about how, in fact, let me talk a little bit more about this. We've clearly demonstrated that the primary risk factors for heart disease, for heart attacks or strokes, is actually this insulin resistance. Dr. David Eddy, a MD PhD who was professor at Stanford, and I think maybe Duke University. I have to look that up. He had a PhD in mathematics and an MD in clinical medicine. And it was a real interesting mix because he demonstrated, because of his knowledge of mathematics, he developed what was called the Archimedes research model, where he could put all this data into a National Institutes of Health supercomputer, and he could adjust one risk factor at a time and see and do it on a person, a real person, but virtual. All their data is now in the computer, and change a risk factor starting at the age 20. In other words, completely normalize or optimize a risk factor, starting it at the age of 20 all the way through age 60. And from that computer analysis, they determined which risk factor had by far the biggest impact of preventing heart attacks. They looked at smoking, they looked at high cholesterol, they looked at high blood pressure, they looked at all the different risk factors. Guess which one risk factor basically rose to the top without any equal near it as the main cause or risk factor for coronary artery disease, for cardiovascular disease? It was insulin resistance. So I know this concept of insulin resistance, it's kind of hard to, so that's why I focused on it so much this weekend, to help you understand. That's why we called it Diabetes Undone, because nobody would go to a program called Insulin Resistance Undone. Like what? That's not for me. I'm not taking insulin. I'm not even going to look into that program. And so we wanted to call it something that would draw attention and then help educate you that that's the tip of the iceberg. But in reality, all of us fall in that risk associated with that part of the iceberg that lies under the ocean surface. And by taking advantage of this information, we can dramatically increase our health for the better. So we've gone a long time, gone longer than we planned to, but I want to thank you for your willingness to listen. And so now you have the opportunity to if you're interested, to sign up for the Diabetes Undone program. I'm going to go right to the back. If any of you have books from previous, the Diabetes Undone, or excuse me, the Goodbye Diabetes book, the Hello Healthy book, or the new book that just came out 6 weeks ago, Memory Makeover, How to Prevent Alzheimer's and Reverse Cognitive Decline. Those books are available in the back. Betsy can help you out with that. And so with that, Pastor, you have some announcements?
Yes, as I mentioned to you, Jan is set up in the back to assist you with anyone who wishes to sign up for Diabetes Undone. And there are two ways that you can take care of it. You can, if you wish to pay with a check, you can just register with her, and she'll take that from you right there and get your name and all that kind of stuff. If you would like the convenience of using a credit card, then you can sign up at this site right here. that you see on the bottom, seemefit.brownpapertickets.com. We have a computer and a tablet back there that you can go and you can sign right up and take care of it before you leave this evening. If you do so, if you sign up this evening, Jan is going to ask for you to fill out the information for your lab report so we can get that in the works, and we will notify you as soon as possible. Yet sometime this week, we'll notify you regarding exactly when you need to show up at Adventist Health Simi Valley Hospital. A week from tomorrow, it'll likely be in the morning. If you can't meet that schedule, then speak with me about it, and we'll arrange another time for you to go and get your blood drawn. So just as a reminder, the price is $199. As we had expressed to you before, that includes the lectures, the expert advice, the group support. It says cooking demo and samples. Actually, Jan is going to have a team of people that you're going to actually get a meal there. It's going to be more than just a little sample sort of thing. You'll get a meal. You'll get the Diabetes Undone workbook, the Diabetes Undone cookbook, the DVD called The 8 Laws of Health, and you'll get access to the video course if you want a refresher for yourself for, I believe it's up to a year, on the Diabetes Undone website. It also includes all of your labs, before and after labs, and as Dr. Youngberg said earlier today, those labs, he was telling me, he was asking me how much we had contracted with the hospital to pay for those labs. He told me that we were getting a very good deal because that's all included in your price. Normally, the labs that we are doing, he said you can pay $150 just for those labs. So again, this is not something, we actually, I'll tell you, if it were not for the generosity of a sponsorship from Adventist Health Simi Valley, they are helping us support this. We could not offer it to you for $199. We'd have to charge it probably closer to $299 to pay for itself. So it's the price that we're offering to you is highly subsidized, but we're glad to be able to do that because we want you to be healthy. We want you to be well. So if you want to come, if a member of your family or a friend is signed up and you want to come as their support person, you can do so for a $79 participants fee. That does not include any labs, and it does not include the participants kit. But you are there in a support role, so that's $79. And if you have previously taken Diabetes Undone and want to come back as a refresher, you can do so. You can bring all of the materials you already have. You already have the participants kit if you went through the program before. And for a fee of $79, you can take the refresher and sit in and experience the whole group environment. That'll include all the food and everything. It does not include any labs. If you decide you want labs, then we'll have to make those arrangements separately. So anyway, just delighted to help you. Any of you have any questions? Okay? We're glad to do that. Again, I want to remind you that we'll also have available in the back two other things. If you would like to be on our email list, if you are not currently on our email list for the Simi Fit and want to be made aware of other health-related events, please make sure there's a little card back there, and Jan can have you sign that back on that table so that you're in our system for the future. And also, I have a few more tickets available for this Ten Commandment musical tomorrow evening in Glendale at 5 o'clock. If you're interested, see me in the back there. Did you enjoy this time? Have you enjoyed this weekend and the opportunity of what we shared? Good. Feel tremendously blessed that we were able to have Dr. Youngberg come and share with us. This is his profession, and this was something that did cost us money to bring in. We're not asking for any donations, and I'm not sharing this with you now because I'm asking for any donations. This is a community service that we offer at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we're delighted to be able to do that. So I'm just glad that it met a need, and we thank you so much for coming. Good night, and God bless.